The teller's face went white as my daughter slammed her palm on the counter, her voice carrying across the marble floors of Chicago's First National Bank. "She doesn't have authorization anymore. We've revoked her access to everything." 20 pairs of eyes turned toward us. I stood there, handbag clutched against my chest, feeling the weight of every stare like stones. My son nodded beside her, his jaw set in that expression I'd mistaken for strength my entire life. The manager emerged from his office, and I watched my children hand him papers with my shaky signature at the bottom. 3 months earlier, I'd signed those documents in my own kitchen, trusting the 2 people I'd raised to protect me. Now those same papers were being used to cut me off from accounts my late husband and I had built over 40 years of marriage. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as security approached. My daughter's perfectly manicured finger pointed at me like I was a stranger, a threat. "She's not mentally competent to handle her own finances." The words echoed off the vault doors. I remember thinking how clinical it sounded, how rehearsed. The security guard, a young man with kind eyes who'd probably helped his own grandmother to her car just that morning, looked between my daughter's confident face and my trembling hands. I could see him making calculations, deciding who to believe. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a performance. I opened my mouth to speak, to defend myself, to explain that these were my accounts, my money, my life. But my voice came out as barely a whisper. "Monica, please, Derek, I just need to—" Monica cut me off with a look so cold it could have frozen the Chicago River in July. "Mother, you're making a scene. The manager has been informed of the situation. There's nothing more to discuss here." The other customers had stopped pretending not to watch. An elderly man in a fedora near the loan officer's desk shook his head sadly, probably thinking I was exactly what my children claimed. A confused old woman who'd forgotten her PIN one too many times. A young mother pulled her toddler closer, as if whatever affliction I had might be contagious. No one came to my defense. Why would they? They didn't know me. They only knew what they saw. 2 successful, well-dressed professionals managing their difficult, deteriorating mother. But let me take you back to where this really started, to a different version of my life when I still believed in the goodness of family. 3 months earlier, my kitchen smelled like cinnamon rolls and coffee, the Sunday morning ritual I'd maintained even after Henry died. My daughter Monica arrived first, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floors of our brownstone in Lincoln Park. She'd always loved this house, used to say she'd never want to live anywhere else. I remember when she was 7, lying on the living room floor tracing the patterns in the Persian rug, declaring that someday she'd live in a house just like this one. "Mom, you look tired," she said, kissing my cheek with lips that felt cold despite her smile. The kiss landed just slightly off-center, not quite making contact, the way you'd kiss someone you were obligated to show affection to rather than someone you actually loved. But I pushed that thought away immediately. This was my daughter, my baby girl, the one I'd rocked through colicky nights and driven to dance practice every Tuesday and Thursday for 8 years straight. My son Derek followed minutes later, bringing his wife Amanda, who immediately started photographing my antique china cabinet for her interior design Instagram. "This light is amazing, Evelyn," Amanda said, angling her phone for the perfect shot. She'd never called me Mom, even after 12 years of marriage to my son. Always Evelyn, keeping that professional distance. I told myself it was generational, that young women today were different about these things. But watching her photograph my possessions with the detached eye of an appraiser, I felt a chill I couldn't quite name. They were successful, my children. Monica ran a marketing firm downtown, the kind with exposed brick walls and cold brew on tap, and employees who worked 80-hour weeks while pretending it was their choice. Derek had made partner at his law office before 40, specializing in estate planning, a detail that should have warned me in retrospect. I'd sacrificed everything to give them those opportunities. Sold my mother's jewelry to pay for Derek's law school, took out a second mortgage for Monica's startup capital. Henry had questioned that decision late one night when we were lying in bed doing the impossible math of debt and retirement. "Evie, we can't afford this," he'd said. But I'd insisted, Parents sacrifice for their children. That's what we do. That's what love means. Except love, I was learning, isn't always a two-way transaction. We sat around the dining table Henry had built with his own hands, and Monica slid a folder across the polished surface. The folder was expensive, leather-bound, embossed with her company's logo. Everything Monica touched had to announce its price tag. "We need to talk about your future, Mom." The word future hung in the air like a question mark. I was 68, not ancient, still sharp enough to manage my own checkbook. But Monica's voice had that gentle, patronizing tone people use with children and the elderly. "We've been worried. You're alone in this big house. The property taxes are insane, and honestly, managing all Dad's investments and the rental properties, it's too much for one person." As she spoke, Monica pulled out a spreadsheet. Of course she had a spreadsheet. She had graphs too, pie charts showing my monthly expenses in alarming shades of red and orange. "Look at this, Mom. Your overhead is eating through your capital. At this rate, you'll outlive your money by your mid-70s. I wanted to point out that her calculations conveniently ignored the rental income from the 3 apartment buildings on the south side, properties that generated $60,000 a month, give or take. But Derek was already leaning forward, his lawyer face on, the expression he probably used on clients right before presenting them with a 6-figure bill. "We've consulted with a financial advisor. The best thing would be to consolidate everything into a family trust. Monica and I would manage it, make sure you're taken care of. You'd have a monthly allowance, no stress about bills or investments." An allowance, like I was 16 again, asking my father for movie money. Like I hadn't spent 40 years building a real estate portfolio from nothing, learning the business from the ground up, negotiating with contractors and tenants and banks when women weren't supposed to be doing those things. "I appreciate your concern," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "but your father and I built this portfolio together. I know how to manage it." Monica exchanged a look with Derek, one of those wordless sibling communications that excludes everyone else. "Mom, Dad's been gone for 2 years, and we've noticed things. You forgot Sophie's birthday last month. You called me 3 times in one day asking the same question about your property tax bill. These are signs, Mom. Early indicators. Early indicators. Medical language wielded like a weapon. The truth was, I had forgotten Sophie's birthday, but only by 2 days. And I'd sent a generous check as soon as I remembered. And yes, I'd called Monica repeatedly about the property tax bill, but only because the city had sent me conflicting notices and I'd wanted her marketing brain to help me craft a response. But the way she told it, I was one step away from forgetting my own name. But I loved them. God help me. I loved them so much it made me stupid. So I listened as they explained how complicated estate planning had become, how they were just trying to protect me from making mistakes. Monica pulled out more papers, power of attorney documents, trust agreements, property transfer forms. The stack was at least 2 inches thick. "Just sign here, Mom, and here. We'll handle everything else." Her pen was already in my hand, a heavy Mont Blanc that probably cost more than my first car. I remember the weight of it, how my signature looked shaky because my coffee had gone cold and my hands were always a little unsteady in the mornings now. A touch of arthritis, nothing serious, but enough to make my handwriting look elderly in a way that would be useful to them later, though I didn't know that yet. Derek helpfully placed small yellow tabs on every line that needed a signature. "Just follow the tabs, Mom. Initial here, full signature there." I signed every single page, 15 documents in total, though I didn't count at the time. And they smiled, those bright, loving smiles I'd worked my whole life to earn. Derek hugged me, and I could smell his expensive cologne, something with cedar and bergamot. "You're doing the right thing, Mom. Now we can make sure you're protected." Monica gathered the papers carefully, slipping them back into that leather folder. "I'll make copies for you," she said, though she never did. After they left, the house felt bigger somehow, emptier. I walked through the rooms Henry and I had filled with 40 years of life, The living room where we'd hosted countless dinner parties, the bedroom where our children had crawled into bed during thunderstorms, the kitchen where Henry had taught Derek to make pancakes and Monica to roll pie crust. Every room was a memory, and suddenly I felt like a ghost in my own home, haunting spaces I no longer quite belonged to. The next week, small things started changing. When I tried to transfer money to pay my gardener, Jose, who'd been maintaining our property for 15 years, the bank called to verify with Monica first. I stood in my study, phone pressed to my ear, while a customer service representative told me they needed to confirm the transaction with the account administrator. "I am the account administrator," I said, hearing my voice rise. "This is my account. I've had this account for 35 years. The representative was apologetic but firm. "I understand, Mrs. Peterson, but according to our records, all transactions over $500 require authorization from Monica Peterson. I'm sure if you call her, we can get this sorted out quickly." I called Monica, and she didn't answer. I called 3 more times. Finally, she texted back, "In a meeting. Is it urgent?" I replied that I needed to pay Jose. She wrote, "Can it wait until tomorrow? I'll approve it tonight." Jose needed to be paid that day. He had a daughter starting college, and the tuition check was due. But I had to wait for my daughter's permission to access my own money to pay a man who'd worked for me for 15 years. My credit card was declined at Whole Foods until Derek approved the charge. I'd been standing at the register with a cart full of groceries, nothing extravagant, just the basics, plus some nice steaks I'd planned to make for dinner. The cashier ran my card once, twice, 3 times. Each declined beep felt like a small public humiliation. The line behind me was growing, and I could feel the impatience radiating from the other customers. "Do you have another form of payment?" the cashier asked, not unkindly. She was young, maybe 25, with elaborate nail art and a name tag that said Jasmine. I fumbled in my wallet for my other credit card, the one I'd had for decades, the one with the photograph of Henry and me in Rome on the front, a custom design from back when credit card companies did those things. That one was declined too. My face burned with shame as I pulled out my phone and called Derek. He answered on the 4th ring. "Mom, I'm with a client. What's wrong?" I explained the situation in a whisper, trying not to let Jasmine or the growing line of annoyed shoppers hear. Derek sighed, the sound crackling through the phone speaker. "Mom, you went over your weekly grocery budget. We talked about this. You need to stick to the budget." I wasn't aware I had a weekly grocery budget, I said, my voice tight. "I'm sorry, I have to go," Derek said. "I'll approve $500. That should be enough." He hung up before I could respond. A minute later, my phone buzzed with a text. "Approved $500. Please try to be more mindful of spending." Please try to be more mindful. I'd been managing household finances since before Derek was born. I'd stretched my father's grocery money to feed a family of 4. I'd turned a modest inheritance into a substantial real estate portfolio. But now I needed to be more mindful. "It's just temporary, Mom," Derek assured me over the phone that evening when I called to ask what was happening, "until we get all the accounts properly organized." I told myself this was love. This was protection. I'd read articles about elderly people getting scammed, losing everything to strangers on the internet. My children were saving me from that fate. They were protecting me from my own vulnerability. But late at night, alone in the bedroom I'd once shared with Henry, I'd lie awake and wonder when protection had started to feel like imprisonment. I'd reach over to Henry's side of the bed, still expecting to find him there even after 2 years. He would have known what to do. Henry always knew what to do. He'd been the practical one, the one who read the fine print and asked the difficult questions. I'd been the optimist, the one who believed in the goodness of people. Together, we'd balanced each other out. Without him, I'd tipped over into naivete, and my children had caught me mid-fall, but not to help me stand upright, to push me down further. "I know you're sitting there, maybe yelling at your screen, telling me to wake up. But here's the thing about betrayal by the people you birthed and raised. It doesn't announce itself with sirens and red flags. It creeps in wearing the mask of concern, speaking the language of love. You don't see the cage until the door locks behind you. And sometimes, even when you hear the lock clicking into place, you tell yourself it's for your own safety. You tell yourself that a cage is just protection with walls. You tell yourself that the people who built the cage love you, and love wouldn't hurt you. So whatever's happening must be something else. Anything else. By the second month, I couldn't access my own bank accounts without approval. The rental properties Henry and I had bought as investments, 3 apartment buildings on the south side, suddenly had new management companies I'd never heard of. I discovered this when one of my long-term tenants, a woman named Patricia who'd lived in our Vernon Park building for 12 years, called me directly. "Mrs. Peterson, I just wanted to thank you for understanding about the rent this month. My daughter's medical bills have been overwhelming, and the new management company said you approved the payment plan personally." I'd approved nothing. I didn't even know there was a new management company. But I told Patricia it was fine. Of course it was fine. She'd been a model tenant for over a decade. One late payment wasn't going to change that. But after hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table and felt the walls closing in a little more. When I questioned Monica about it, she was in her office. I could hear the ambient noise of her trendy workspace in the background, the hum of creative people being productive. "We're maximizing efficiency, Mom. The income goes straight into the trust. You'll get your allowance on the 1st of each month." She said it like it was good news, like I should be grateful. The old management company was charging too much and letting tenants slide on payments. This new company is much more professional. But my allowance was a fraction of what those properties generated. I did the math in my head. The same math skills that had helped Henry and me build our real estate portfolio from nothing. 3 buildings, 24 units total, average rent around $2,500 a month. That was $60,000 in gross rental income, give or take. Even accounting for mortgage payments on the 2 buildings we hadn't fully paid off, property taxes, maintenance, management fees, there should still be at least $35,000 a month in net income. Probably more. I'd been doing these calculations for decades. The numbers didn't add up. Where was the rest of the money going? I asked Derek, thinking maybe his legal mind could explain the discrepancy. "Mom, there are a lot of expenses you're not considering. Property insurance has gone up. We've had to make some repairs. The management company takes 15%. It all adds up." But 15% of 60,000 was 9,000, not the 40,000 that seemed to be missing. I knew how to calculate percentages. I'd been calculating them since before Derek learned to tie his shoes. I started keeping a notebook, writing down every conversation, every discrepancy. I hid it in the back of my closet, behind the box of Henry's clothes I still couldn't bring myself to give away. The notebook was small, spiral-bound, the kind you can buy at any drugstore. But it became my lifeline, my proof that I wasn't crazy, that the numbers really didn't make sense, that something was deeply wrong. The rental income had been $60,000 a month. My allowance was $5,000. Even accounting for taxes and maintenance, there should have been more. Much more. I called the management company directly and got transferred 4 times before someone finally told me, "All inquiries need to go through Monica Peterson. She's the primary contact." The man on the phone was apologetic, but firm. "I understand your frustration, ma'am, but those are the instructions we've been given. For liability and privacy reasons, we can only discuss account details with the designated contact person." My own properties, and I couldn't even get information about them. I'd been reduced to an outsider in my own financial life. I tried calling our longtime accountant, Martin, who'd handled our taxes for 20 years. His secretary put me on hold for nearly 10 minutes before Martin himself picked up. "Evelyn, I'm sorry, but Monica has informed me that she and Derek are now handling all family financial matters. She's asked me not to discuss your accounts with you directly." "Martin, you've known me for 2 decades. You've sat at my dining room table. You've eaten my pot roast. You know I'm not incompetent." I hated the pleading tone in my voice, the way I had to defend my own sanity. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I really am. But legally, with the power of attorney documents, Monica has every right to restrict account access. My hands are tied. After that call, I sat in Henry's study for an hour, surrounded by his books and his paperwork and the faint smell of his pipe tobacco that had somehow soaked into the wood paneling and refused to fade even 2 years after his death. I cried, finally, the kind of deep, wrenching sobs I'd been holding back since the day at Whole Foods. Not just for what was happening now, but for the loss of everything I'd thought was true. I'd believed that loving your children meant they'd love you back. That sacrifice would be recognized and honored. That family meant safety. I'd been wrong about all of it. The brownstone, my home, the place where I'd raised my children, where Henry had died holding my hand in our bedroom, became a topic of concerned conversation. "It's too much house for one person, Mom," Derek said during what I'd thought was just a casual dinner visit. We were sitting in my dining room, eating the pot roast I'd spent all afternoon making, the recipe Henry's mother had taught me when we were first married. Monica had barely touched hers, pushing the carrots around her plate with the disinterest of someone who survived on kale smoothies and boutique grain bowls. "The maintenance costs alone are eating into your assets. We've been looking at some really nice senior living communities. Independent living, not assisted care. You'd have your own apartment, but there'd be people around, activities, meals prepared." Derek pulled out his phone and started showing me pictures. Lakeside Manor, a sprawling complex on the outskirts of the city. All beige buildings and manicured lawns, and elderly people playing shuffleboard like extras in a commercial about aging gracefully. "There's a wait list, but Monica knows someone on the board. We could get you in within a few months." I felt my chest tighten. I don't want to leave my home. The words came out stronger than I'd expected. Monica set down her fork with a decisive click against the china. "Mom, we're not asking. We're telling you what's best. You signed the papers. We have the authority to make these decisions now." The authority. As if I were a territory they'd conquered, a problem they'd been granted jurisdiction over. "I signed papers giving you control of my finances, not my life, not my home." Derek's expression hardened, and for a moment I saw a stranger sitting across from me. Not my baby boy, the one who used to crawl into my lap with skinned knees and trust me to make everything better. A stranger wearing my son's face. "Mom, the finances and the house are connected. The property taxes on this place are $38,000 a year. The heating bill alone is astronomical. It's not sustainable." But it had been sustainable for 40 years. We'd bought this brownstone in 1986 when Lincoln Park was just starting to gentrify, paid $400,000 for it when everyone said we were crazy. Now it was worth nearly $4 million. The property taxes, yes, they'd gone up. But so had everything else. The equity in this home represented a lifetime of wise decisions, and they wanted me to abandon it for a beige apartment where someone else decided when dinner was served. That night, after they left, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. When had I become so small? My hair had gone completely white in the 2 years since Henry died, but it was my eyes that shocked me. Empty, defeated, like all the light had been drained out. I'd given my children everything, my time, my money, my independence. And this was what I'd purchased with those sacrifices, my own irrelevance. I thought about Henry, about what he would say if he could see what was happening. He'd always been protective of me, sometimes too protective, but it had come from love. This, what Monica and Derek were doing, this wasn't protection, this was something else entirely. Henry would have been furious. He would have fought back. But Henry wasn't here, and I was alone, and I didn't know how to fight. Not yet. Have you ever felt yourself disappearing? Not dying, but fading, like a photograph left too long in the sun? That's what those months felt like. Every day, another piece of my autonomy vanished. They started sorting my mail before I saw it. I discovered this when my friend Diane mentioned a charity gala invitation she'd assumed I'd declined, but I'd never received the invitation. Monica had intercepted it, responded on my behalf without telling me. They programmed my phone to forward certain calls to them first. I only found out because my doctor's office mentioned that Monica had rescheduled my annual physical. Your daughter called last week and said you needed to change the appointment. She seemed very knowledgeable about your health concerns. But I hadn't asked Monica to call. I hadn't wanted to reschedule. I'd been going to Dr. Rosen for 25 years, every June like clockwork, but apparently I no longer controlled my own medical calendar. When my best friend Diane tried to take me to lunch, Monica called her directly and suggested I was having cognitive issues and shouldn't be making plans without family supervision. Diane, bless her heart, called me immediately to ask what the hell was going on. That phone call was the first crack in their perfect plan. Evelyn, your daughter told me you've been confused, forgetting appointments. She said you'd wandered out of the house last week and gotten lost. But you sound fine to me. Actually, you sound angry, and anger is pretty damn lucid. Diane had known me for 30 years. We'd raised our kids together, survived widowhood together. She knew the difference between confusion and fury. I didn't wander anywhere, I said, my voice shaking with rage. I walked to the library like I do every Thursday. I've been walking to that library for 40 years. Monica thinks that because I'm 68, a walk to the library is wandering, like I'm some dementia patient who can't remember my own name. I told Diane everything, words tumbling out like a dam breaking, the papers I'd signed, the allowance, the rental properties I could no longer access, the senior living communities they were pressuring me to tour, the way they'd started controlling who I saw, where I went, what I did with my own time, how I'd become a prisoner in my own life, and the guards were the children I'd loved more than anything in this world. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. Then Diane said something that changed everything. Evelyn, do you know what financial elder abuse looks like? Because what you just described checks every single box. Financial elder abuse. The words felt like ice water. I'd heard the term before, seen it in news articles about strangers stealing from vulnerable seniors. But my own children? They love me, I whispered into the phone. They're just trying to help. Diane's voice was gentle but firm. Honey, love doesn't forge signatures and isolate you from friends. Love doesn't take your independence and call it protection. You need to talk to a lawyer, your own lawyer, not Derek. Derek will find out. I stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. He'll what? Cut me off completely. Have me declared incompetent. Lock me away in Lakeside Manor, where I'd eat my meals at assigned times and participate in supervised activities like a child at summer camp. Let him find out, Diane said. Evie, listen to me. You're one of the smartest women I know. You built a real estate empire from nothing. You raised 2 kids while working full-time. You nursed Henry through cancer without falling apart. You are not incompetent, and you are not powerless, but you have to fight back. That conversation happened on a Tuesday afternoon. By Wednesday morning, I'd made an appointment with Harrison Chen, an estate attorney whose office was in the Loop. I told Monica and Derek I had a doctor's appointment. The lie tasted bitter in my mouth like spoiled milk. But I was learning that survival sometimes requires deception, and I was in survival mode now, whether I'd chosen it or not. I took the L downtown, something I hadn't done in months. Monica had been driving me everywhere, saying public transportation wasn't safe for someone my age. But I'd been riding the L since before Monica was born. I knew which cars to avoid, which stops were busy enough to be safe. The ride felt like freedom, like reclaiming a small piece of myself. Harrison's office smelled like leather and old books. He was younger than I expected, maybe 50, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a firm handshake. His assistant brought us tea in delicate porcelain cups, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was being treated like a person instead of a problem to be managed. I showed him the papers I'd signed. I'd snuck into Monica's briefcase during her last visit and photographed every document I could find, a small act of rebellion that had made my heart pound with fear and adrenaline. Harrison read in silence, his expression growing darker with each page. He made notes in a legal pad, his handwriting small and precise. Finally, he looked up. "Mrs. Peterson, these documents give your children complete control over your assets. Every property, every account, everything your husband left you. Did you read these before signing?" His tone wasn't judgmental, just factual, but I still felt the shame burning in my chest. "They said it was for my protection." My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. Harrison leaned back in his chair, choosing his words carefully. "I'm going to be blunt with you. This is a textbook case of undue influence and possible fraud. Your children isolated you, created a sense of urgency, and got you to sign away your rights. The question is, what do you want to do about it?" What did I want? I wanted my life back. I wanted to stop being treated like a senile child. I wanted my children to face consequences for what they'd done. But more than anything, I wanted to understand how the two babies I'd nursed and raised and loved had turned into strangers who saw me as nothing more than an asset to be managed and exploited. Harrison explained my options. I could challenge the documents in court, claim undue influence or lack of mental capacity when I signed. But that would be a public battle, expensive and emotionally devastating. "You'd essentially have to prove you were incompetent when you signed, which might create other complications. And your son is a lawyer. He'll fight hard, and he'll make it personal." Or, he suggested, I could play along while we built a case. Document everything, gather evidence, and most importantly, find out exactly what my children had been doing with my money. "They're moving assets," Harrison said, pulling up property records on his computer. His fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up databases I didn't know existed. "One of your rental buildings was sold 2 weeks ago. The money went into the trust, but there's been significant outflow. Large transfers to accounts in Monica and Derek's names. They're not just managing your money, they're taking it." The numbers on the screen blurred as tears filled my eyes. $2 million. Gone. Transferred to accounts I'd never authorized, signed off on with the power of attorney I'd given them. The Vernon Park building, the first property Henry and I had ever bought together, sold without my knowledge. That building had been special. We'd bought it the year Monica was born, scraped together the down payment by living on ramen and love. Henry had painted every apartment himself, working evenings and weekends. And now it was gone, sold for $2 million that had vanished into my children's accounts like water into sand. I want you to understand something about this moment, about the exact second when grief transforms into rage. There's a physical sensation, like a switch flipping in your chest. The sadness doesn't disappear. It crystallizes into something harder, colder, infinitely more useful. My tears dried. My hands stopped shaking. I looked at Harrison with a clarity I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. "What do I need to do?" He smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who'd seen this before and knew how to fight it. "First, we document everything. Second, we set a trap. And third, we make sure that when they fall, everyone is watching." Harrison pulled out a fresh legal pad and started outlining a strategy. "We need to be methodical about this. Every document, every conversation, every transaction. I want you to start keeping a detailed log. Times, dates, exact quotes if you can remember them. Take photos of everything, bank statements, bills, letters. If they bring you any new documents to sign, photograph them before and after signing. Better yet, call me first." He slid a small digital recorder across his desk. "This is voice activated. Keep it in your purse when they visit. Some of what you record won't be admissible in court, but it'll help us build the narrative. and if they say something particularly damning, we can use it to pressure them into a settlement." "I don't want a settlement," I said, surprising myself with the vehemence in my voice. "I want them exposed. I want everyone to know what they did." Harrison nodded slowly. "Then we'll need to be even more careful. Public exposure means we can't afford any mistakes. They'll hire the best lawyers money can buy, your money, ironically, and they'll try to paint you as a confused elderly woman seeking revenge for imagined slights." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "Mrs. Peterson, are you prepared for how ugly this is going to get? They're your children. When this goes public, it won't just damage their reputations. It'll destroy your relationship with them permanently. There won't be any going back from this." I thought about Monica's cold kiss, Derek's patronizing tone, the way they'd erased me from my own life piece by piece. "There's nothing left to go back to," I said. "They already destroyed the relationship when they decided I was worth more to them as a piggy bank than as a mother." The next 2 weeks were the best acting performance of my life. I played the confused, compliant mother. I toured senior living facilities with Derek, nodding at the communal dining rooms and the craft workshops and the assisted living wing that was, "just in case you need it down the line, Mom." I let Monica control my phone calls and Derek monitor my spending. I signed more papers they put in front of me, after Harrison had reviewed them first and confirmed they didn't actually grant any additional authority. But at night, alone in my bedroom, I photographed every document I could find. I recorded conversations on my phone, the recording app disguised as a meditation program Monica had encouraged me to try. I made copies of bank statements they'd left on the kitchen counter. Harrison taught me how to be a detective in my own home, and I discovered I was good at it. Really good at it. Every morning I'd wake up and put on my confused mother mask. Every night I'd take it off and become someone else. Someone harder. Someone who was going to win. I became a spy in my own home, and the work was exhausting in ways I hadn't anticipated. Not just physically, though photographing documents in poor light while my arthritic hands shook took its toll, but emotionally. Every smile I gave Monica was a lie. Every time I agreed with Derek's condescending explanations, I was swallowing my rage. I'd spend hours on the phone with Harrison, going over details, refining our strategy. Then Monica would call, and I'd have to shift gears immediately, become the confused, compliant mother who was so grateful for all their help. One afternoon, Derek stopped by unexpectedly with more papers. "Just some updated beneficiary forms, Mom. Standard stuff." I made tea with shaking hands, not from fear, but from fury, while he spread the documents across my kitchen table, the same table where I'd signed away my rights 3 months earlier. "What do these forms do?" I asked, injecting just the right amount of uncertainty into my voice. "They make sure that if anything happens to you, the assets transfer smoothly to Monica and me. No probate, no court delays, no lawyers taking their cut." He said it so casually, as if he weren't planning for my death, calculating how to maximize his inheritance. As if I weren't sitting right there, very much alive, listening to him discuss my demise like it was a business transaction. I signed the forms, after photographing them with the phone in my pocket, after noting the time and date in the notebook hidden in my bedroom. Harrison had already reviewed similar documents and given me the go-ahead. They were egregious, certainly, but they'd add to our case. Every overreach, every power grab, every paper signed under pressure. It was all evidence. That night, I called Harrison in tears. Not sad tears, but tears of sheer, overwhelming rage. He was planning my funeral right in front of me, talking about when something happens like I'm already gone, like I'm already dead and they're just waiting for it to be official. Harrison was quiet for a moment. "Use that anger, Mrs. Peterson. Channel it. Every tear, every moment of humiliation, every time they treat you like you're already in the ground. Remember it. And when we expose them, you'll be very much alive to watch their world burn." The real breakthrough came from my granddaughter Sophie, Derek's youngest daughter. She was 16, sharp as a tack, and unlike her father, she still had a conscience. She visited me one afternoon when her parents thought she was at a friend's house. We sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd signed away my life, and she cried as she told me what she'd overheard. "Grandma, they're planning to sell this house. Dad already has a buyer lined up. They're going to put you in Lakeside Manor and split the profit from the brownstone. I heard them talking about it like it was already done, like you didn't even have a say." Her young face was twisted with disgust and shame. I told Dad it was wrong, and he said I didn't understand adult responsibilities, that sometimes you have to make hard choices for people who can't make them for themselves. "But Grandma, you're not incompetent. You're not sick. They're just greedy." She grabbed my hand, her teenage fingers strong around mine. Mom was talking about remodeling their kitchen with part of the money, their kitchen, with money from selling your house. And Dad kept saying you'd be happier at Lakeside, that you'd thank them eventually. I wanted to throw up. Out of the mouths of children comes the truth we're too scared to say ourselves. Sophie became my ally, my spy in enemy territory. She'd text me screenshots of conversations, warn me when Monica or Derek were planning to visit. She even helped me set up a new email account they didn't monitor, so I could communicate with Harrison without them knowing. We used her friend's Netflix account as a code. If she texted me a recommendation for a movie, it meant Derek was planning something. A TV show meant Monica was up to something. We had a whole language of deception, this 16-year-old girl and I, united against her father and my son. Research shows that family members are responsible for roughly 60% of elder financial abuse cases, and the average victim loses $120,000. I'd already lost millions, but I wasn't going to lose everything. Sophie and I developed our own rituals during those weeks. She'd come over after school, ostensibly to help her grandmother with technology or grocery shopping, or whatever excuse we'd invented for Derek and Monica. Really, she was downloading files from her father's home computer, photographing documents she'd find lying around their house, reporting back on conversations she'd overheard. "Grandma, this is kind of exciting," she told me one afternoon, her eyes bright with the thrill of our secret mission. "Like we're spies." I looked at this brave, beautiful girl who was betraying her father to protect her grandmother, and my heart broke a little. She shouldn't have to choose. No 16-year-old should be put in this position. But she'd made her choice, and I was grateful for it, even as I mourned what it cost her. "It's not a game, sweetheart," I said gently. "What we're doing, it's going to hurt your father. It's going to hurt your whole family. Are you sure you're okay with that?" Sophie's expression hardened in a way that reminded me painfully of Derek. "Dad's the one who's hurting people. You're just stopping him. There's a difference." She showed me a spreadsheet she'd found on her father's laptop. "Look at this. He's got everything calculated out. How much the brownstone will sell for. How much Lakeside Manor costs per month. How much profit they'll make after 5 years. You're not a person to him in this spreadsheet, Grandma. You're just numbers. Line items in a budget." I stared at the cold, clinical calculations. My life, my home, my future, all reduced to columns and rows, assets and expenses, profits and losses. In Derek's spreadsheet, I died in year 7. He'd actually put a date on it, calculated his inheritance down to the penny. I felt nauseous. "Can you send this to me?" I asked. Sophie nodded, already pulling out her phone. "I'll send it to that secret email. Grandma, when this is over, when Dad finds out I helped you. He's going to hate me." I pulled her into a hug, this girl who was braver than her father had ever been. Then he'll have something in common with me. We'll hate him together. Harrison and I crafted a plan that was part legal strategy, part theater. The key was making them feel safe, confident enough to make their final move. So I agreed to tour Lakeside Manor and even told Monica it seemed nice. The activities coordinator was lovely, I said, injecting just the right amount of weary acceptance into my voice. And the apartments have good light. Monica actually hugged me, and I felt her body relax against mine, all the tension of our previous conflicts draining away. I'm so glad you're finally seeing reason, Mom. This is what's best for everyone. Best for everyone. The euphemism people use when they mean best for themselves. I hugged her back, and for one brief, painful moment, I remembered when she was small. 4 years old, maybe 5, coming to me after a nightmare, her little body trembling as I held her and promised that nothing bad would ever happen to her. I'd meant it then. I would have fought tigers for her, walked through fire, given up anything to keep her safe and happy. And somewhere along the way, that love had curdled into something else. Or maybe it hadn't changed at all. Maybe I just hadn't noticed that her love for me had never been the same as my love for her. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady, even as my heart splintered. "Thank you for taking such good care of me." She pulled back, smiling that bright professional smile that never quite reached her eyes. "That's what family is for, Mom." I smiled and nodded and counted down the days until their world would collapse around them. The tour of Lakeside Manor was particularly painful. Derek drove me, pointing out features of the facility like he was a real estate agent showing a property. "Look at that garden, Mom. You love gardening, and they have a book club. You'd enjoy that." The unspoken message was clear. This is where you belong. With other old people, doing old people activities, safely contained and managed. The activities director, a cheerful woman named Beth who probably wasn't even 40, showed us a sample apartment. It was small, just a bedroom, bathroom, and sitting area. Everything was beige and safe and utterly soulless. "We find that downsizing can be very freeing for our residents," Beth said brightly. "Less to worry about, less to maintain, less to own, less to be, less space to take up in a world that had already decided I was taking up too much." I walked around the apartment, trailing my fingers over the generic furniture, looking out the window at the manicured lawn where elderly residents walked in slow, supervised circles. This was my future, according to my children. This beige box, this managed existence, this living death. "It's lovely," I said, and Derek's face lit up with relief and triumph. "I think I could be happy here." The lie tasted like ash, but I swallowed it down. Beth beamed. "Wonderful. Let me get you some paperwork to start the application process." In the car on the way home, Derek was more relaxed than I'd seen him in months. "I'm proud of you, Mom. I know this wasn't easy, but you're making the right choice. Monica and I will make sure you're comfortable. We'll visit all the time." More lies, but these were his lies, and I let him tell them. We were both performing now, both pretending this was about anything other than money and control and the systematic erasure of my autonomy. Harrison discovered that Derek had used my power of attorney to take out a loan against the brownstone, my house, the one with no mortgage, that Henry and I had paid off 15 years ago. He'd borrowed $800,000 and transferred it to an account in his name. The loan documents had my signature, but handwriting analysis confirmed what I already suspected. Derek had forged it. Not even bothered to have me sign it myself. Just traced my signature from one of the legitimate documents and hoped no one would check. Monica had been even more creative, setting up shell companies to funnel rental income away from the trust. Harrison found 3 separate LLCs, all with variations of our family name, all receiving regular transfers from the rental properties. Peterson Property Management, Peterson Holdings LLC, Peterson Estate Services, each one funneling money into accounts Monica controlled. Together, they'd siphoned off nearly $4 million in 8 months. $4 million. I kept coming back to that number, trying to understand it. What do you need $4 million for when you're already successful? What void are you trying to fill? Or was it not about the money at all? Was it about power? About reducing their mother to nothing so they could feel like something? Harrison showed me more of what he'd uncovered. Monica had been using my money to fund her lifestyle for years, not just months. The timing started around the time her marketing firm began struggling. before Henry died even. She'd been slowly siphoning money from the rental properties, small amounts at first, then larger. When Henry got sick, when I was too distracted with doctor's appointments and hospice care to pay attention to finances, she'd gotten bolder. She saw an opportunity, Harrison said, his voice clinical, but his eyes sympathetic. Your husband was dying, you were vulnerable, and she seized the moment. I'm sorry to be blunt, Mrs. Peterson, but this was calculated. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a financial emergency. This was a long-term strategy. Derek had been part of it from the beginning. The legal documents he'd prepared for the family trust were actually just mechanisms to transfer my wealth to them. He'd been planning this for years, waiting for Henry to die, waiting for me to be alone and vulnerable enough to manipulate. The power of attorney documents were just the final step in a scheme that had been years in the making. I thought about all the times Derek had visited Henry in the hospital, had sat by his bedside talking about estate planning and making sure Mom is taken care of. I'd thought he was being responsible, helping his father ensure my security. But he'd been planning, calculating, waiting. Did they? I couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the horrible thought that had been growing in my mind. Harrison understood. Did they hasten your husband's death? No. I've reviewed all his medical records. Everything was standard care. But did they see his illness as an opportunity? Yes. Absolutely yes. That answer should have been comforting, but it wasn't, because it meant my children hadn't killed their father. But they had used his death. They'd weaponized my grief, turned my mourning into their opportunity. In some ways, that felt worse. The confrontation needed to be public. That was Harrison's advice, and I agreed. Private battles give people room to lie, to rewrite the narrative. But public exposure, that's different. That leaves marks. We chose the family's annual charity gala, an event Monica had organized for her marketing firm's biggest clients. It was being held at the Art Institute, black tie, 200 guests. The perfect stage for my final performance. I bought a new dress for the occasion, deep emerald green, the color of money and envy. The saleswoman at Saks had tried to steer me toward the mature section, but I'd insisted on this one. Form-fitting, elegant, expensive. I paid for it with the one credit card Derek and Monica didn't know about, an old emergency card I'd found in the back of a drawer. I had my hair done at the salon I used to frequent before my children started monitoring my spending. The stylist, Maria, didn't recognize me at first. Mrs. Peterson? Oh my God, where have you been? I've been so worried. Maria had been doing my hair for 15 years. She knew every gray root, every curl pattern, every preference. Your daughter called 6 months ago and canceled all your appointments, said you were going to a place closer to home. My daughter, I said, watching Maria's face in the mirror, has been making a lot of decisions without consulting me. But that's about to change. Maria studied me for a long moment, then smiled. Good. You want your usual, or you want something that makes a statement? I smiled back. A statement, please. She worked for 2 hours, transforming my white hair into an elegant updo, subtle but sophisticated. She did my makeup too, refusing to charge me. This one's on me, Mrs. Peterson. I don't know what you're planning, but I can tell it's important. As Maria worked, I watched the transformation in the mirror. Each brush stroke, each pin carefully placed, each layer of makeup applied. I was putting on armor. This wasn't vanity. This was war paint. The woman who looked back at me from the mirror was someone I barely recognized. Not defeated, not diminished, dangerous. Mrs. Peterson, Maria said softly, meeting my eyes in the mirror, whatever they did to you, make them pay for it. I smiled, and it was the smile I'd been practicing for weeks. Cold, certain, final. Oh, I intend to. The night before the gala, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what was coming. In less than 24 hours, I would publicly destroy my children. Their reputations, their careers, their futures, all of it would be gone. And I would be the one who did it. Not a stranger, not an enemy. Their mother. Part of me, a small, dying part that still remembered nursing them as babies, wanted to call it off. Wanted to give them one more chance to make it right, to apologize, to return what they'd stolen and promise to do better. But I knew that was the same part of me that had signed those papers in the first place, the part that loved them so much it made me stupid. I couldn't afford to listen to that part anymore. I got out of bed and walked through my brownstone one last time. After everything was done, I'd sell it. Too many ghosts here, too many memories that had been poisoned. But tonight, I walked through the rooms and said goodbye, to the life I'd built with Henry, to the mother I'd been, to the woman who had believed that love was enough to protect her from harm. Tomorrow, I'd be someone new, someone who understood that love without respect is just another form of abuse. Someone who knew that family was a privilege, not a right, and that privilege could be revoked. Someone who would never again mistake control for care or manipulation for concern. I stood in the nursery that had been Monica's, then Derek's, now just a guest room I never used. I remembered rocking them to sleep in this room, singing lullabies, making promises about all the wonderful things their futures would hold. I'd meant every promise, but they'd grown up to be people I didn't recognize, people who saw their mother as an obstacle rather than a person. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the ghosts of the children they'd been. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you from who you became." Then I walked out and closed the door behind me. The gala was everything Monica loved. Excessive flower arrangements that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Champagne fountains with bottles that had pretentious French names. Chicago's elite pretending to care about whatever cause was fashionable this year. This year, it was childhood literacy, which would have been touching if anyone actually cared about childhood literacy and wasn't just there to network and be seen. I arrived alone, which surprised the valet. My children had assumed I'd need Derek to drive me, that I was too fragile to navigate the city by myself. I'd taken an Uber, giving the driver a generous tip and asking him to wait a moment while I steadied myself. Not because I needed steadying, but because I needed a moment to prepare for what came next. Their faces when I walked in were almost worth the entire 8 months of hell. Almost. Monica was in the middle of air-kissing a client when she saw me. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, confusion, anger, and finally, that practiced hostess smile she'd perfected. Derek was by the bar, and he actually dropped his drink, the glass shattering on the marble floor. Monica recovered first, rushing over with her hostess smile firmly in place. "Mom, we didn't expect you to come. You said you weren't feeling well." I kissed her cheek, leaving a perfect lipstick mark. "I'm feeling better than I have in months, sweetheart. Wouldn't miss your big night for anything." The thing about revenge is that timing matters. You can't rush it, can't let anger make you sloppy. So I spent the first hour of the gala being charming, greeting Monica's clients, complimenting the decor, playing the role of the proud mother. I chatted with aldermen and CEOs and socialites. I praised Monica's organizational skills. I laughed at unfunny jokes. I made them think everything was fine. I spoke with a woman who ran a nonprofit for children's education. She gushed about Monica's generosity, how much the marketing firm had donated to their cause. I smiled and nodded, knowing that generosity had been funded by stolen money. My stolen money. Every charitable donation, every client dinner, every designer dress Monica wore, all of it purchased with funds taken from me. A man named Gerald, some kind of investment banker, cornered me by the champagne fountain. "Your daughter speaks so highly of you, Mrs. Peterson. She says you're enjoying your retirement, taking it easy." Taking it easy, as if I'd chosen to be sidelined from my own life. "Yes," I said, sipping champagne I didn't taste. "Monica and Derek have been very attentive." "It's wonderful when families take care of each other," Gerald said, completely missing the irony. "Too many elderly people are alone, with no one looking out for them." "You're lucky," Lucky. I wanted to laugh or scream or throw my champagne in his oblivious face. Instead, I smiled and excused myself, counting down the minutes until dinner. I caught Monica watching me from across the room, her expression calculating. She said something to Derek, who looked at me with barely concealed suspicion. They knew something was off. I was too composed, too present. The confused, compliant mother had been replaced by someone they didn't quite recognize, and it made them nervous. Good. Let them be nervous. Let them spend these last few hours of their comfortable lives feeling the shadow of consequences approaching. They'd given me 8 months of increasing dread, watching my autonomy disappear piece by piece. They could handle one evening of unease. I waited until dinner was served, until everyone was seated and the room had that pleasant buzz of conversation and wine. The first course had been cleared, and the servers were bringing out the main course, some architectural arrangement of duck and microgreens that looked like it belonged in a museum rather than on a plate. Then I stood up, tapping my champagne glass with a fork until the room quieted. Monica's face went white. Derek half stood from his seat, but it was too late. I had the microphone, and I had the room's attention. Good evening, everyone. I'm Evelyn Peterson, and I'm so grateful to be here tonight celebrating my daughter's success. My voice was steady, clear, nothing confused or incompetent about it. The microphone carried my words to every corner of the room. Monica has always been brilliant at marketing, at crafting narratives and selling stories. Tonight, I'd like to share one of her most impressive campaigns, the one where she and her brother convinced an entire family that their mother was losing her mind. The silence in that room was absolute. You could have heard a champagne bubble pop. Someone's fork clattered against their plate. I continued, my words measured and precise. 8 months ago, I signed documents giving my children control over my finances. They told me it was for my protection, that I was too old and confused to manage my own affairs. What they didn't tell me was that they'd been planning to steal everything my late husband and I had built over 40 years of marriage. Derek was on his feet now, trying to interrupt, but I'd given the AV tech my flash drive before dinner. Harrison had handled that part, slipping the kid $100 and instructions. The screens around the room lit up with bank statements, property transfer documents, loan agreements, all the evidence Harrison and I had compiled over the past 2 weeks. Numbers projected 10 feet high, impossible to ignore. That's $4 million they've taken in 8 months. Rental properties sold without my knowledge, loans taken against my home, money transferred to their personal accounts while they gave me a $5,000 monthly allowance and told me I should be grateful. My voice didn't shake. Not once. I'd practiced this speech 100 times in my bathroom mirror, perfecting every word, every pause. Monica tried to grab the microphone, but I stepped back smoothly, and Harrison appeared at my elbow. I'd invited him as my +1, though I hadn't mentioned that to my children. He was imposing in his tuxedo, every inch the successful attorney. "These are serious allegations," someone shouted from the back. A man with a thick Chicago accent, probably one of the aldermen. "Do you have proof?" Harrison's voice was calm, professional, carrying that particular authority lawyers develop. "We have extensive documentation, all of which has been filed with the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. Mrs. Peterson's children exploited her grief and trust to commit financial elder abuse. What you're seeing on these screens is just a fraction of the evidence. We also have forged documents, including a loan against Mrs. Peterson's property with a forged signature. That's fraud. We have recorded conversations in which Mr. Derek Peterson and Ms. Monica Peterson discuss selling their mother's home without her knowledge or consent. We have transfer records showing systematic theft of rental income. This isn't a family dispute. This is a criminal matter." The room erupted. Guests pulled out phones, taking pictures, probably already texting friends about the drama unfolding at Monica's gala. I watched my daughter's carefully constructed professional reputation crumble in real time. Someone was recording on their phone, the video probably already uploading to social media. Monica's biggest client, a woman who ran a chain of luxury hotels, stood up and left, her husband following behind her. Then another client. Then another. Like rats from a sinking ship, except I was the ship, and I was finally staying afloat while they drowned. Derek's face turned purple with rage or shame or both. "This is slander," he shouted. "You're confused, Mother. You signed those documents willingly. You asked us to help you." But his voice lacked conviction. Too many people were looking at the numbers on the screen, doing their own math, reaching their own conclusions. "I wasn't confused," I said, and my voice cut through his protests like a knife. "I was grieving. I was lonely. I was vulnerable. And you exploited that. You're my children, and you exploited that." My voice finally broke on those last words, but I didn't care. Let them see the pain. Let everyone see what they'd done. And I felt nothing. That's the thing about being betrayed by your own children. It kills something in you, some fundamental belief in the goodness of the world. You can't mourn that loss and seek justice at the same time, so you choose justice and deal with the grief later. Actually, that's not quite true. I felt something. As I watched Monica's face crumble, watched Derek's carefully constructed life shatter in real time, I felt satisfaction. Cold, hard, undeniable satisfaction. And yes, underneath that, grief. But the grief was old, had been growing for months. This moment, this public reckoning, was just making visible what had already been true. My children had died to me the moment they decided I was worth more as a victim than as a mother. I was just making their funeral public. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Is this true? Monica, are these accusations true?" She couldn't answer. She was crying too hard, her mascara running in black streaks down her face, her professional facade completely shattered. Derek tried to salvage something, anything. "This is a misunderstanding. My mother is confused. She's been having episodes. I've had a full cognitive evaluation," I interrupted, my voice cutting through his excuses. "Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a neuropsychologist with impeccable credentials, examined me last week. I scored in the 98th percentile for my age group. Would you like to see the results? I have copies for everyone." Harrison had arranged the evaluation. Knowing Derek would try this exact defense, we'd planned for everything. The room was chaos now. People arguing, phones out, recording everything. Monica's carefully curated event had turned into a circus, and I was the ringmaster. Good. Let them see. Let everyone see what happens when you underestimate a woman just because she's old, just because she's grieving, just because she's supposed to be easy to control. Security tried to escort me out, but Harrison informed them that would be unlawful detention, and he said it with the kind of legal authority that made them reconsider. We left on our own terms, walking out through a gauntlet of shocked faces and camera phones. Behind us, I could hear Monica crying, Derek shouting explanations that no one wanted to hear. Someone was demanding their money back for their ticket. Someone else was already on the phone with a reporter. The narrative had been set, and no amount of spin could save them now. Harrison walked me to his car. He'd insisted on driving me home, said I shouldn't be alone tonight. As we pulled away from the Art Institute, I looked back at the building, at the chaos visible through the windows. "Are you okay?" Harrison asked. It was the first time he'd asked me that question as a person rather than as a client. "No," I said honestly, "but I will be." We drove in silence for a while, the Chicago streets passing by in a blur of lights. Finally, I spoke. "I destroyed my own children tonight. I stood in front of 200 people and announced to the world that my son and daughter are thieves and liars. What kind of mother does that?" Harrison was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "The kind of mother who taught them right from wrong, and who holds them accountable when they choose wrong. The kind of mother who refuses to be a victim. The kind of mother who knows that enabling bad behavior isn't love, it's just another form of harm." I cried then, finally, the tears I'd been holding back all evening. Not tears of regret. I didn't regret what I'd done. But tears for what I'd lost, what had been taken from me, what could never be recovered. The relationship I'd thought I had with my children had been a fiction, but the loss of that fiction still hurt. Grief doesn't care whether the thing you're mourning was ever real. The legal proceedings moved faster than I expected. With the evidence Harrison had compiled and the public nature of my accusations, the state's attorney was motivated to act quickly. Elder abuse cases don't usually get this much attention, but the video from the gala went viral. 3 million views in 2 days. The local news picked it up, then the national news. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk about elder abuse, about children who preyed on their parents, about the vulnerability of aging in a society that devalues the elderly. Derek was disbarred within 6 weeks. Turns out lawyers who commit fraud against their own mothers don't get to keep their licenses. The disciplinary board hearing was public, and I attended every session. I watched Derek try to explain himself, try to justify what he'd done. He claimed he'd been trying to protect family assets, that he'd had my best interests at heart. But the forged signature on the loan documents couldn't be explained away. Neither could the shell companies. Neither could the recorded conversation where he told Monica, "She'll never know. She barely checks the statements anymore." Monica's firm lost every major client, and she was forced to file for bankruptcy within 3 months. Her business partner sued her for fraud, claiming Monica had been embezzling from the company too. Turns out when you steal from your mother, people start wondering who else you might have stolen from. The lawsuit revealed that Monica had been running her marketing firm like her personal piggy bank, mixing client funds with personal accounts, charging personal expenses to the company card. Her entire empire had been built on fraud, and I'd just been the most trusting victim. The properties they'd sold were returned to me through court order. The Vernon Park building was a bit more complicated. The new owners had bought it in good faith and weren't thrilled about giving it back. But Harrison negotiated a deal where they kept the building, and I received the full sale price plus damages, which came out to nearly $3 million, more than Derek and Monica had gotten for it. Justice, it turns out, sometimes comes with interest. The money they'd stolen was garnished from their wages, their homes, their cars, everything they'd purchased with my stolen assets. Monica's house in Evanston, the one with the chef's kitchen she'd been planning to remodel, sold. Derek's Tesla, repossessed. Amanda's jewelry, Sophie's college fund that Derek had been bragging about, all of it gone. Seized to repay what they'd stolen. Sophie came to live with me for a while. Her parents' legal troubles had made home life unbearable, and she asked if she could stay in my guest room. I said yes immediately. She was innocent in all this, and she'd been brave enough to help me when no one else would. We became close in those months, closer than I'd ever been with my own children. She told me about school, about boys, about her dreams of becoming a social worker. I taught her how to manage money, how to invest wisely, how to protect yourself from people who see you as a resource rather than a person. But here's what surprised me. They tried to apologize. Derek showed up at my door one night, after the restraining orders had been lifted, looking like he'd aged 10 years. His suit was wrinkled, his hair uncombed. He'd lost weight, and not in a healthy way. "Mom, I know I can't undo what I did, but please, you have to understand, we were just trying to secure our own futures. The economy is unstable, and we have kids to think about." I stood in the doorway of my brownstone, the home they'd tried to sell out from under me, and I felt that same cold clarity I'd experienced in Harrison's office. You had a mother to think about too, and you chose to rob her instead of love her. I closed the door before he could respond. Some apologies come too late to matter. Monica sent letters, long, rambling explanations about pressure and stress and how she'd lost sight of what mattered. She wanted to rebuild our relationship, she said, wanted me to forgive her. The letters arrived weekly, always in expensive stationery, always with her distinctive handwriting. She wrote about therapy, about understanding what she'd done wrong, about how much she missed me. But forgiveness isn't something you can demand or even request. It's something that has to be freely given, and I had nothing free left to give her. They'd taken it all, and what I'd reclaimed was mine to keep. The properties were returned to my control, all 3 apartment buildings generating income that finally flowed into accounts only I could access. I changed banks, changed accountants, changed every professional relationship that Derek and Monica had touched. The Brownstones' mortgage was paid off with the recovered funds, and I sold it anyway, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Too many ghosts in those rooms, too many memories of trust that had been weaponized against me. I bought a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in Wicker Park with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. It was mine, truly mine, purchased with my money and titled in my name alone. I had Harrison draft a new will, an ironclad document that explicitly excluded Monica and Derek. My estate would go to Sophie and to charities working on elder abuse prevention. Let my children's betrayal at least prevent someone else's suffering. Sophie visits me every week. She's in college now, studying social work, and she says I inspired her to focus on elder advocacy. "You showed me that being old doesn't mean being powerless, Grandma," she told me over coffee last month. We were sitting in my living room, the afternoon sun streaming through those floor-to-ceiling windows, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. She's the only member of that family I maintained contact with, the only one who saw what was happening and tried to stop it. The others, Derek's wife, Monica's husband, my other grandchildren, they all chose sides, and none of them chose mine. That's fine. I've learned that family is what you build, not just what you're born into. Diane and I travel now. We went to Italy last spring, spent 3 weeks eating pasta and drinking wine and laughing at how ridiculous it all was, the idea that we were supposed to shrink and disappear just because we'd gotten older. We toured the Colosseum, and I thought about empires that fall, about power that corrupts, about survival. We stood in the Sistine Chapel and I cried, not from religious feeling, but from the sheer overwhelming beauty of it. The reminder that humans can create things of value, that we're not all predators and prey. We're planning a trip to Greece next year, and I'm learning the language because I can, because my brain works just fine despite what my children tried to claim. I practice with an app on my phone, the same phone they once programmed to spy on me. I've reclaimed it, just like I've reclaimed everything else. I'm 69 now, and I feel more alive than I did at 40. The financial recovery was important, but it wasn't the real victory. The real victory was reclaiming my sense of self, refusing to accept the narrative that aging means losing agency. I look at that woman who stood in the bank 8 months ago, being cut off from her own accounts while her children performed their rehearsed betrayal, and I barely recognize her. She was someone who believed that sacrifice would be rewarded, that love was enough to protect her from harm. I know better now. Here's what I want you to understand, what I need you to hear if you're listening to this story and recognizing pieces of your own life in it. Elder financial abuse is insidious precisely because it comes wrapped in concern. The people who harm us most effectively are the ones we trust most completely. They know our vulnerabilities, our fears, our desperate need to believe in their goodness, and they use all of it against us. The warning signs are always there if you know where to look. Isolation from friends and community, sudden changes in financial arrangements, pressure to sign documents quickly without proper review, being made to feel incompetent or burdensome. If you're experiencing these things, you're not crazy, you're not confused, you're being abused, and it's not your fault. But here's the other thing I need you to know. You're not powerless. Even when they've taken your money, your property, your independence, they can't take your will to fight back unless you let them. Document everything. Find allies, whether that's a trusted friend, a grandchild who still has a conscience, or a lawyer who specializes in elder law. Build your case carefully and strike when you're ready, not when you're just angry. Anger fades, but strategy wins. The psychological toll of this kind of betrayal is real and lasting. I still have nightmares sometimes, dreams where I'm signing papers I can't read while my children smile and nod. I still feel that flash of panic when my bank sends me a notification. That split-second fear that someone's accessed my accounts. Trauma doesn't just disappear because you won the legal battle. It lives in your body, in your reflexes, in the way you second-guess your own judgment. I'm in therapy now, working through it, learning to trust myself again. My therapist, Dr. Chen, no relation to Harrison, specializes in trauma. She's helped me understand that what happened wasn't just financial abuse. It was emotional abuse, psychological manipulation, a systematic dismantling of my sense of self. We're rebuilding that self, piece by piece. Some days are harder than others. That's not weakness. That's survival. I've started speaking at conferences about elder abuse, sharing my story with groups of social workers and lawyers and financial advisors, teaching people how to recognize the signs, how to protect their clients and patients. Every time I tell my story, it gets a little easier. The shame fades a little more, because it wasn't my shame to carry. It was theirs. Last month, a woman came up to me after one of these talks. She was probably in her 70s, dressed in a neat pantsuit, her hands shaking as she handed me a piece of paper. "My daughter has been doing this to me," she whispered. "Everything you described. I thought I was going crazy." I gave her Harrison's number and the number for Adult Protective Services. I told her she wasn't crazy, she was being targeted. I told her to document everything and to find people she could trust. 3 weeks later, she emailed me. She'd hired a lawyer. She was fighting back. Small victories, but they matter. If you're watching this from somewhere else in the country or the world, I want to hear from you. What time is it where you are? What city are you calling home? Drop a comment and let me know, because one of the things my children tried to take from me was connection. And I'm rebuilding that one conversation at a time. If this story resonated with you, if you've been through something similar or you're worried about someone you love, hit that like button. It tells me I'm not alone in this, and more importantly, it tells you that you're not alone either. And here's my question for you, the one I've been asking myself for months now. What would you have done? Would you have fought back sooner? Would you have trusted your children in the first place? Would you have forgiven them after everything that happened? I genuinely want to know, because every story like mine is a little different, and there's wisdom in all of our experiences. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you think. Tell me your own stories if you feel brave enough. We heal by speaking the truth, and sometimes that truth is ugly and painful and doesn't have a happy ending. But it's still worth telling. Before I go, I want to remind you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. There are more stories coming. Stories about betrayal and survival and the complicated ways we navigate family and trust and getting older in a world that doesn't always value that. I'll put 2 other videos up on your screen right now. One about a woman who discovered her husband's secret second family, and another about a mother-in-law who fought back against her son's manipulative wife. Both of them will make you angry and inspired in equal measure. Until the next story, take care of your heart. Protect it, but don't close it off completely. The world still has good people in it, even after everything. I'm proof of that. I found Harrison. I have Diane. I have Sophie. The betrayals we survive don't have to define us, but they can inform us, make us sharper and stronger, and less willing to accept treatment we don't deserve. That's not bitterness. That's wisdom. And I'll take wisdom over innocence any day of the week. So from my condo in Wicker Park, with my Italian phrase book on the coffee table and my bank accounts finally truly mine, I'm signing off. Keep fighting, keep documenting, keep believing that you deserve better. Because you do. Every single one of you deserves better than to be used and discarded by people who should have protected you. Remember that. Write it down if you have to. Put it on your mirror. And when someone tries to tell you that you're too old, too confused, too much of a burden to make your own decisions, remember my story and tell them to go to hell. Take care of yourselves out there. And thank you for listening.